This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, also sprach Zarathustra.
Hello everyone, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review critique show that's putting the humanities back in science fiction, I've decided is our new catchphrase for the minute.
Excellent. I like it.
I am Gepwin, and I am joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Izix.
Hi.
This week we are doing a movie because it's episode 50.
The 50th anniversary episode.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. We're doing this almost a little more than a year, technically, yeah?
Yeah, because we had a little break there.
Yeah.
Why did I decide to start this in summer? It's awful.
I don't know.
It's the worst.
Because we're excited to do it and we didn't want to wait.
You know what's great this summer? I think I want to lock myself in a small room where I can't have fans or air conditioners running.
Yeah, that does make things tricky. So maybe we should get onto the what we're doing today. So some sort of one of those greatest movies of all time sort of thing.
Yeah, one of those deals.
Yeah.
This week we watched 2001, A Space Odyssey, and we watched it like 19 years too late.
A little bit, yeah. We're a little behind the times. We're experiencing some Z-Rust here. It's fine, you know. Pan American is going to come back anytime now, right?
I'm assuming most people have heard of this one.
Yes, it is one of those movies that kind of... It's like the Shakespeare of science fiction movies. It kind of just keeps showing up in places. People reference it constantly. The Simpsons have referenced it. Futurama referenced it. I'm pretty sure Star Trek has in some fashion. And it just pops up in all sorts of places. Some involving science fiction, some very much not. And it's just everywhere.
Yeah, it's even in Kerbal Space Program.
Yes.
Which is a video game for people who don't spend too much time on YouTube.
The most important video game of all time, by the way.
So this film was released in 1968, which means it is the most contemporary thing with old school Star Trek that we have yet done as a movie.
Indeed. In fact, there's one of the actors in this movie is in Star Trek.
Oh,
at least a episode of.
That's fun. I missed that.
Yes. We'll get on in a moment.
So this film was co-written and directed by legendary director Stanley Kubrick. And also written by Arthur C. Clarke.
Yes, and it's actually kind of an interesting story, the collaboration that kind of came together for this. Because Kubrick was like, I want to do something cool. And people were like, hey, you should go hang out with this Arthur C. Clarke guy. And Kubrick's like, I don't know. He seems kind of like a shut-in. And then he goes to Sri Lanka where Clarke hangs out. And they're like, oh, yeah, we could hit it off. And it's like, give me a short story and we could adapt into a movie. And so Clark's like, here, have this story called The Sentinel and 5 others or something like that. And we'll figure it out something. And then it sort of grew out of that. And the long-term plan had been that Clarke would write the novelization sort of at the same time as Kubrick was getting the movie together. And Kubrick would have first author on the screenplay and Clarke on the novel. And, that kind of worked out, I guess.
Apparently it's one of these things where you have to read the book to understand the movie, which I feel like means they didn't make the movie well enough.
I have to disagree here, and I have a feeling that we probably don't see quite eye to eye on this one. The movie and the book are kind of very intentionally different experiences. I've only read part of the book, unfortunately, so I'm not going to be super authoritative on it. I've actually read one of the sequels. It's kind of weird. Anyway, but the movie is very much trying to be more of a visual sound experience as opposed to necessarily the whole this is what's actually going on sort of stuff, sort of to inspire you to engage in wonder and to sort of contemplation, while the novel is more like just your science fiction sort of writing there, where you actually know what's going on.
Yeah, I'll agree the movie's trying to be a big visual something or other experience, and we can get to that later. I know you have the majority opinion on this movie.
I'm not going to say it's perfect. There are some bits I'm like, but Overall, I really do enjoy this movie, and one of the reasons I picked it for my pick of this around here is because it's a movie that has kind of influenced me a fair bit as far as my own creative works and things like that, and sort of how I think about space and the universe and all that jazz. Sure, I've maybe evolved quite a bit from that original influence, but it is sort of one of those sort of foundational quote texts. No, it's a movie as far as my own sort of experience in science fiction. So that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to sort of cover it. Shall we get into it? We have other things to talk about, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't done actors.
Yes.
I'm excited. This is my second time ever watching this. I saw it once when I was a kid with my parents, and I remember being deeply confused. And this is the second time that I've watched it, and it's been at least 20 years between.
It's been so long. You're now after when the sequel took place.
Yes. Which I hadn't even heard of until I started researching this.
Yeah, it wasn't nearly as well known or watched. I generally enjoyed the sequel. And actually, if you're looking for explanations on what some of the stuff is that's going on, though not everything, some of that does get a little bit more better laid out in what's in that one there.
Yeah, I did read the synopsis to the sequel later on.
But shall we touch on actors?
Yes, we've got. It was difficult for me to find the main actors because they switch characters partway through the movie without explanation in a weird way.
It's sort of a change of focus, yeah.
So I believe the main character is probably Keir Dullea playing Dr. Dave Bowman.
Yes.
They also have Gary Lockwood playing Dr. Frank Poole, who's the other dude.
And that's the guy we've seen before in Star Trek.
His name does sound a bit familiar.
Yeah. Remember in Where No Man Has Gone Before?
Oh, was he the
Gary Mitchell
God dude?
Yeah.
Oh.
He doesn't have to wear he's no crazy contacts that hurt your eyes this time though. So
I was having so much trouble telling all these 60s white dudes apart.
Yeah, you kind of have to pay close attention to their facial structure or something like that. It's like, yes, it's another guy with dark hair, white skin, jumpsuit. Okay.
Also, William Sylvester playing Dr. Haywood Floyd, who is the earlier protagonist.
Yeah, he kind of is, fades from focus about halfway through the movie.
And the only character that anyone remembers from this thing, of Douglas Ryan as the voice of HAL 9000.
HAL 9000, ultimate computer dude.
He was known for a lot of narration and voiceover work at the time, and apparently he was picked to be the voice of the computer after they heard his narration on something called The Universe.
So we should check out this universe thing and see if it sounds like HAL.
Apparently he was originally cast as the narrator because earlier versions of the script told you what was going on. But later they changed it to being the voice of the computer.
Here's a couple other sort of little factoids here. So this is actually the I guess sort of the quote final version of the movie is actually almost 20 minutes shorter than the original version that Cooper was getting together.
Sheesh.
And second, for the premiere of this movie, over 200 people actually walked out.
Yeah, 240.
Yes.
And for the first month of its run, the theaters were so empty the studio almost pulled the movie.
Yeah.
The interesting fact that I learned at watching the documentary 2001 Making of a Myth was that they were going to pull the movie out of theaters, but the theater owners called the studios and said, so we're seeing an uptick in attendance because the stoners have started coming to the movie. And then they keep bringing their friends.
Yes. The friends are like, you might be high as a kite here, but I'm really getting crazy on this too. So
No, they were all high.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I'm high too, but
They were all high. And yeah, so, I don't know how this could have been 20 minutes longer, This movie is the movie version of turning in a 5-page paper that is a half-page paper that you double-spaced and used long words.
And increase the margins for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Though all the same, my synopsis is about 2,000 words in length. Though it is padded a few bits. Anyway.
You couldn't make it 2,001 words?
It's actually like 2,200. I'm close, you know.
All right, we should probably jump in. I don't know how you're going to make this longer than a 5-minute synopsis, honestly, but...
I'll do the 10-second synopsis afterwards. Anyway, so we begin in darkness. Ominous music plays, setting the mood for us during an overture. And then, also Sprach Zarathustra plays as we round the moon and see the sun rising beyond the earth. The moment is very powerful and visual.
That's the dun 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 thing everyone remembers.
Yes. The dawn of man. We are shown landscapes at dawn, presumably somewhere in Africa. The place is arid. After seeing some bones, we see some early hominids hanging out near some tapirs. Jaguar shows up to ruin one of the hominids' day, and then later there's some arguments over water while another group of folks creep in on the first group.
And the jaguar just jumps a dude. Like, I'm pretty sure they just had a jaguar attack this actor in a monkey costume.
Just like, kitty attack! Yow!
Also, tapirs are South American.
Yeah, so this is a little confusing. The visitors to the first group are spotted, and then the yelling commences. The invading group chases the first group off and away from the watering hole. Then that first group has a frightful night trying to hide from the big kitties, and the next morning, our ancestors wake up and see something. Very unsettling music starts playing as they spot the monolith. It is shaped similar to a chocolate bar and stands upright. The hominids freak out and yell at it as it simply stands there. One of them touches it. Others come up and interact with it as well as it is shown to be safe. Later, the crew is hanging out by some bones. We have a vision of the sun coming over the monolith and line at the moon. The hominids look at the bones. They pick up one and start playing with it, knocking around other bones, then smashing the bones like a club. Then they smash the broken skull. Skull smashing is interlaced with the tapir with being felled. Our clubber has some meat now and is getting to eating, as does the clubber's crew. Later, it's time to visit those jerk faces that took over the watering hole. The clubber crew approaches the invaders and starts clubbing one of the invaders to death, scaring the rest off. The clubber tosses his bone up in the air and... suddenly satellite. We pan over to the earth as craft devices and installations float by. The music swells. The Blue Danube is the tune as we take in the majesty of space and the creations of tomorrow. Today, there is a wheel in space. A Pan-American space shuttle approaches. Inside is a sleeping man in a floating pen. The stewardess in Spaceballs the headwear comes in, using her sticky shoes to overcome microgravity. And that's just the start of the beautiful sequence that is all about docking with the space station and takes a few minutes.
It's spinning. Everything spins. This is probably the origin of my problem with everything spinning in movies.
Just keep rotating, man. It's going to be fine. Later, the man is on the space station, getting off an elevator. He converses with the receptionist about meeting a Mr. Miller. Miller shows up, greets him, and then has the visitor enter a verification kiosk where we learn a little bit about him. He's Dr. Haywood Floyd, and he's going to the moon. Floyd and Miller banter until Floyd stops by a picture phone booth to make a phone call. He discovers he's a dad, and he's going to miss his daughter's birthday party. Oh no. Floyd meets then some Russians. They're scientists who are doing some antenna work, and they want to know why Floyd's going to this Clavius place on the moon. There's a lot of weirdness they've noticed about this Clavius. And, no one's being able to make contact, and no one's allowed to land. And the Russians mentioned there's some sort of virus outbreak of unknown origin. Floyd says, you can't really discuss things, man. It's all right.
It's Pandemic Galaxy Edition.
It's like Andromeda Strain, but on the moon. Speaking of the moon, to the moon! We get more space travel art and stewardesses and Spaceballs the headwear. The Blue Danube plays again, and we engage in, hey, this is the future type stuff. Finally, we can come down for a landing. Meeting time with the suits. We meet Halverston, who gets up and starts speaking before turning it over to Floyd. Those assembled have discovered something. He comments about the cover story unsettling people, but stresses the need for secrecy. He comments about culture shock needing to be conditioned to avoid and all that fun jazz. And then there will be a plan to reveal it all to the public at some point, but, Halverson thanks Floyd and the meeting continues without us. Because we're now flying a craft over the surface of the moon! More beautiful shots and unsettling music later. We see Floyd and his friends in the spacesuits starting to eat. After some banter, Floyd has showed some pictures of magnetic anomalies. That's how they found it. And given the dig, it seems to have been deliberately buried. 4 million years ago, man. They have no clue what it is. They land and we are shown an open pit excavation site. Within is a monolith. The gang, in spacesuits, head on down. The creepy music builds. Floyd touches the monolith. They line up for a few photos. Then there's an ear-piercing tone that all those assembled here, including the viewer, because I had to turn down the music, the sound there.
Yeah.
They look up and see the sun coming over the monolith in line with the Earth.
Now, it took me a while to realize the creepy music they play every time one of the monoliths shows up is the same music they use in Left 4 Dead when a witch is nearby.
I did not notice that. Huh. I'll have to pay attention to that next time I play Left 4 Dead. The Jupiter mission. 18 months later. The spaceship Discovery 1 slowly moves on by. It is long with a bulb up front, engine section in the back, a long spine between, and a big antenna dish about halfway up along it. Inside, we see a man jogging around in circles, as in along a curved floor, where every direction is down, implying it is rotating. We see coffin-like containers with humanoid shapes. There are 2 beds, and we see a red light. The red light represents the ship's computer, HAL. The men are Dave Bowman and Frank Poole. Lunchtime, while we tune into the BBC, seems they gave an interview which helped with some exposition. We learn that the 3 crew are in hibernation, put there before they left. There's a supercomputer named HAL 9000, who's hella smart. HAL's a powerful AI that watches over the ship and monitors everything, including the hibernation system. The 9000 computer series is apparently foolproof and incapable of error. HAL likes working with people and is constantly busy, so HAL's existence is fulfilling. Bowen doesn't know if HAL's got real emotions.
This whole sequence implies that the people who wrote this never used a computer in their lives.
A little bit, yeah. Though I guess in the 60s it was a little bit different as far as the user experience goes. But still, there's maybe some consulting they could have done.
They made computers infallible.
Yes. But I think we can maybe touch on about some of that a little bit later. Later, Frank gets a transmission from his parents. They wish him happy birthday. Later, time to play chess with Hal. Hal, of course, wins. Dave, in his various recreational activities, starts sketching the hibernating crew. And Hal wants to see the sketches. Upon seeing them, he compliments Dave's improved skill. Hal has a question, though. He wonders if Dave is having second thoughts about the mission. Dave's like, "What do you mean?" Hal elaborates about some of the odd things about the mission. Hal comments about the strange stories, like something being dug up the moon, and the tight security, and the early hibernation of the trio. Dave calls him on this probably being Hal doing his work for the psych report. No, that Hal. Hal then says he has picked up a fault in the Big Dish transmission system. They got apparently 72 hours to fix it before it fails, and they lose contact with Earth forever. Uh-oh. One punch card printed out later, and several scenes of the guys working about the ship. They get a reply from Mission Control to give them the go-ahead to replace the part. We get the first view of the pods. Spheres with little grappling arms. With heavy spacesuit breathing sounds, the pod launches. This is the halfway point of the movie, by the way. Dave exits the pod with a replacement gizmo, and the breathing sounds change as he floats on over to the dish.
Dumbest spacewalk in history. He's not even tied to anything.
Yeah, this is very ill-advised.
He starts about a mile out from the ship and jumps out of the pod and propels himself towards the satellite dish.
Hope you don't miss. After many tense moments later, the part is changed out and everything seems okay. Later, they're checking the old part, and there's nothing wrong with it. Hal suggests to put the old module back and then just kind of let it fail. That way they know that what's wrong for sure. Mission Control gives the go-ahead for this, but they also suggest that Hal might be in error. Hal pipes up and says, I hope you're not concerned by the possibility being in error and stuff, guys. Dave's like, Hal, what's going on? What's going on? Hal chimes back, that's probably just human error, guys, Frank asks about the computer error in the 9000 series, but Hal's like, nah, we're perfect. For reals. Dave's like, okay, groovy, glad you're perfect, dude. Also, Frank, you mind coming down to the pod to check something out just real quick right over here? Yeah. They get in the pod. Inside, they turn off all external comms and check to make sure Hal can't hear them. Frank's got a bad feeling about Hal. Dave, too. They figure to prove Hal wrong about the part all they got to do is put it back, change out, basically follow through with the plan they've already working on. And, when it doesn't fail, they're like, aha, Hal, you're wrong, man. Frank's got a strange feeling about Hal. All the while, Hal's looking at them through the window. Frank presses on about what to do if Hal is in fact busted. Hal controls the whole ship, after all. So they'd have to disconnect him, cut off his higher functions, and keep the lower functions in place. Dave also talks about what Hal might think about them pulling the plug. Meanwhile, Hal watches, reading their lips. He knows! EVA time. Frank in the pod this time while Dave monitors. More heavy breathing. Frank leaves the pod and drifts towards the dish. Then his pod turns around, it lowers its arms, and goes for Frank. Dave sees Frank tumbling away. His O2 line is pulled and he struggles to get it reattached. The pod tumbles off as well as Frank goes still. Dave tells Hal to ready pod 3 for EVA. Dave pushes Hal for info, but he's not talking. Dave goes on out in the pod, sans helmet, to pursue Frank. He catches up, grabs Frank via the pod's arms, and starts back to the ship. Meanwhile, Hal proceeds to kill the hibernating crew, because why not? Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Dave's back and he wants in. But, I'm sorry, Dave, says Hal. I can't do that. Hal declares that the mission is too important for Dave to disrupt it, and he knows about the disconnect plan. Dave tells Hal he'll go in through the emergency airlock. Hal points out that without his helmet, that might be a little tricky. Hal hangs up. Dave lets Frank go and positions the pod by the airlock. He opens the airlock, turns the pod around, and lines up the doors. After tense moments of readying the explosive bolts of the pod's hatch, he throws a switch and is rocketed into the airlock and into vacuum. He bounces off the far end back and hits the switch to get a breath of fresh air. Hal watches. Dave puts on a helmet and heads to the computer core while Hal asks him what's up. Hal pleads that he hasn't been right, but that he's totally going to be okay again, and he feels much better, for sure. Dave opens the logic memory center and heads on in while Hal keeps pleading. Dave 0Gs into a red room filled with slots and all the surfaces. Dave uses a key to pull out glass modules from the slots. As he works, Hal's words grow slow and slurred. Hal talks of his mind going. He can feel it. He's afraid. Hal introduces himself and gives some facts about himself. And he has a song to sing if you'd like to hear it. Gepwin, would you like to hear it?
Sure.
Okay, I don't actually have it in front of me. It's called Daisy, by the way. So Hal sings Daisy.
How do you not have that memorized? Like, I've had that song memorized since I was 5, just through cultural osmosis.
Daisy, something.
Also, there's a second verse to that song in which Daisy turns the guy down.
Good on her. So as Hal's singing, his words grow slow and grow deep, and Dave continues to work, and then he growls to an end. Hal is deactivated. And then Dave hears, "Good day, gentlemen." He looks over to see a pre-recorded briefing on his mission. It's Dr. Floyd again, here to explain that now that everybody's awake and at Jupiter, 18 months ago they discovered intelligent life, and here's all the backstory, and it sent some radio missions to Jupiter, that's why they're going, and that's why they're there. So, go check that out, guys. Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite. The creepy music is back as we pan down to the gas giant, and as we see a reflection of light, a monolith comes into view. Large and floating in space near our moon, the Discovery comes into view nearby. The blackness of the monolith makes it hard to see other than through direct reflections from the sun as it tumbles through space. The visuals of it, the ship, the planet, the moon, are haunting and unsettling. A pod emerges from the Discovery. The pod approaches the massive monolith. We pan up from the view of what is and enter what is beyond. Flecks of light start streaming at us from Dave's perspective. So we switch occasionally to a view of his face as he endures the vibrations and the sights. The lights grow bright and have wonderful patterns as we get deeper, further beyond.
This is the psychedelic part that everyone remembers.
Yeah. The sequence is just so beyond words. You should really see it for yourself. Yeah.
Also, hand animated.
Yes. There's like several different techniques they were sort of using the various bits here. But yeah, it's hand animated stuff and some tricksy photography on some other bits and like filters on like landscapes, and it's craziness. It's just something that I recommend everyone see at least once. And then Dave is somewhere. The pod is in a room with lights on the floor. It's white and very amber posh. The pod sits amongst the furniture. He looks out and sees a man in a spacesuit. It's him, older, grayer, wrinkles on his face. The pod is gone, and this older Dave is now Dave now. He walks across the room and into the bathroom. He looks in the mirror and sees he's aged. His eyes express shock. He looks in the main room again and sees an old man having a meal. There are spacesuit breathing sounds, but then they fade away. The old man in the robe turns around to look at where Dave was, and we see that this is a much older Dave, and this is now Dave now. He gets up from his food and comes over to where the Dave in the suit had been, looks around, sees he's not there, and turns back. He sits and gets ready to return to his meal. After biting, he knocks his glass off the table. It breaks and he goes for it. But he pauses as he notices that there's a very, very old man in the bed. It is Dave, and it is Dave now. The very, very old man lifts his hand and points to something beyond the foot of the bed. It's the monolith. It stands before him. Dave is a being in a bubble, a star child, soft, unborn, and ever-looking. We zoom onto the monolith. The moon is in view. We pan down to see the Earth. Dave, now the star child, slowly comes into view from the side as we pan. Dave watches the Earth, and we watch Dave as the movie ends.
Space baby.
Space baby! Which, even Space Ghost Coast to Coast, I think, did one point. I'm a space baby! So yeah, that was a pretty trippy end of the movie.
Yeah. I don't understand. This is one of those times we keep watching these kinds of things that are like the classic everyone in the world must see this movie. It's remembered as the cinematic masterpiece, or my entire childhood.
Yeah.
And I watch it and I go, am I human? Because like this was a failure on almost every level as a film. And I don't understand.
Overall, I have to disagree. And this is like a rare occurrence when we're like probably going to have like a very divergent set of opinions here on Watches of Tomorrow. So I guess mark your calendars, guys. So yeah, I actually have to disagree. I think part of it might be informed by my experiences with sequel and sequel novels. So I guess maybe I have a little bit more sort of to work with. And also when I was quite young, I saw it like 5 times. So, so I guess I had a little bit more opportunity to sort of digest it from an impressionable age to sort of get a general feel and vibe of sort of what's going on. The super short version of what's going on is Monolith shows up in ancient times, probably helps some early hominids figure out tool use. Later, we're in the near future. Humans discover a monolith on the moon. It sends a signal to Jupiter. They send a spacecraft to go check it out. On the way, the computer goes a little bit nutty because the crew that is awake has been not told what the mission is, and the computer's like, you cannot jeopardize the mission. This is too important, etc., etc. They shut down Hal, and then Dave goes and encounters the monolith and is both brought into it and also pushed beyond. And similar to how the early hominids were sort of pushed to the next level, this is him also being pushed to the next level, and is becoming some sort of super psychic entity being. That's the short version.
Everybody talks about this movie like, well, you don't like it because you don't understand what's going on. But I got all of that.
You clearly understand it.
Yeah.
But, so what are your critiques here?
Well, the thing is just so badly made as a movie. Like, the visuals are very pretty, but as a way of doing film, it just fails utterly. It doesn't really communicate anything. It intentionally doesn't communicate things, which is an artistic style that you can pull off, but not really in this kind of medium easily. Like, you would probably need to go back to some of the old Dadaist visual experiments. And, my main thing is that it's basically the best description that I heard recently when I was talking to about this with someone, is that this is kind of when someone, like that old trope of when someone catches you smoking a cigarette and goes, well, you're going to have to smoke the entire case of cigarettes until you hate it, but for space. It's like, oh, did you think space travel was cool and exciting? Well, here is 2 hours of spaceships being the most boring thing possible, carrying the two most boring humans alive.
Now, Frank's only kind of boring on the surface. If you actually got to know him, you don't do that in the movie. Never mind.
And I completely understand what they were going for, because it was obviously very, very intentional to make it slow and methodical and be like, this is what real space travel is like. It is boring as all heck. And also, look how disaffected and out of touch with humanity being in space has made these two people to the point where the computer is acting more human than they are. So I get that it was a cinematic choice, but it was very badly implemented to the point that it just made the movie impossible to sit through.
There is a lot of it that is very, very, very drawn out. And that is perhaps, a critique that I'll be happy to throw at it. And there are a number of sequences that are, great. It's like, okay, I'm sort of getting a chance to sort of take in fully what's being presented here in this environment. But okay, now I'm done doing that.
And there's things that you can do with it, but there's so many weird little things. Everyone talks about the music and the visuals going together. But the music and the visuals don't go together. It basically adds epic music to very, very boring things that don't match up in any particularly meaningful way. Every time that they use the music from the docking sequence, every time they use that in a parody, like in the Simpsons space episode,
Yep.
They sync the music up to the action so that it makes visual sense for the music to be playing at the time.
But in this case, not quite. It's sort of like we're just playing a waltz so we can say that we're having the waltz of spacecraft flying about, but we're not really sort of, making the spacecraft dance.
And in fact, from some interviews that I heard kind of by happenstance a month or so ago, this movie was scored by someone with original music. And then when he was making it during the editing, Kubrick started playing coincidentally royalty-free orchestra music over it and was like, oh my god, this syncs up so well. So I guess, bugger that guy who wrote all the music for this thing.
So maybe it did sync up better in for Kubrick's longer version somehow, and then the cutting desynced it, and then he probably should have just gone with original music anyway. So we can shake our fist at Kubrick.
This may be very slightly nitpicky, but the match cut in the beginning, the most famous match cut in cinematic history, where you throw up the bone and it becomes the spacecraft, isn't a match cut. They didn't get the angles to match up right.
Yeah, it's a little off.
It's off, and it's just, why is it off? You had the bone there, and the spaceship is a model. It's not like you had to take a picture of an actual spaceship and sort of get it to work. Like, you had a model, and you composited it over a background. You could have made it match.
But what if Kubrick was a time traveler, and this was actually from a future that did exist until he made the movie?
And the main thing was, like, you can use the slowness. Like, I wouldn't have had a problem with it being slow and drawn out, except every single part of it is slow and drawn out. You go from, like, here is a very, very slow panning shot of a spaceship. Here's a very, very slow panning shot of another spaceship going exactly the same speed. And now we're going to transition into a third shot, which I'm pretty sure is the first shot of the spaceship that we just saw a minute ago.
Yep.
So there's just so much padding. This is a 30-minute movie that's 2.5 hours long.
Yes. So, yeah, I do have to agree with your critique there. Now, though, sometimes I do enjoy just sort of sitting back and just sort of taking it in, even if I do get part of the parts.
I could see some of that. Like, it may have been because I had a very busy week and I had to kind of work in watching this movie over 2 days before we recorded it.
So you're like, come on, let's get to the main thing. Okay.
Also, it bugs me that you have, when people do these kinds of like, oh, this movie asks so many questions. We don't even know the answers to these questions or what the questions were supposed to be because we didn't bother putting any of them in. It's kind of like we made a movie where we didn't think about what the point or messaging was supposed to be, but instead we said we did it on purpose.
There was to be a message of sorts.
But then they took it out.
Yeah, there is in one of the earlier drafts, I think it was, when Dave goes full space baby there, he was supposed to return to Earth and actually all those satellites and things like that you see at the early in the movie, a bunch of those are actually carrying nukes, and he was going to destroy those.
So he's supposed to go full Dr. Manhattan on them.
A little bit. But the science, this made me seem a little depressing, and I think that bit actually is kept in the novel. Again, I didn't finish it, so do take that with a giant grain of salt. But there was, I guess, confusion about the end of the novel then, because people thought the Earth was destroyed too, but it's just the satellites.
Yeah, and apparently in this version of the universe, the Cold War is still happening.
Yes. In fact, that becomes a bit of a sticking point in the sequel. I want to touch on that real quick.
Sure, I read the Wikipedia synopsis of the sequel. So.
Well, the sequel is 2010, the day we made contact or something like that. Anyway, so it's like, well, we don't really know what happened to the previous mission. We know the Discovery is kind of dead in space, and the Russians like, we got a spaceship, let's go. And so they go and they bring some of the Americans with, and they go visit the monolith, and they visit the Discovery and discover like, oh yeah, it's here. Dave's not here, man. And they turn on Hal. They figure out what was up with him, and then the monolith goes missing, and then suddenly Jupiter's turning into a star, and they need to escape real quick, and the end.
Yeah, the aliens turned Jupiter into a star, and then said, Europa's ours now, off limits, go away.
Yeah, there's something special about that one. Go away. All these worlds are yours, but that one.
Which seems like it doesn't that kind of contradict the thing they were doing with the first film, where they're evolving humanity? Now they're like, nope, this bit's ours. Bugger off.
But there's a reason for that pops up in the sequel novel 2061. You see, there's a life that was on the verge of becoming intelligent on Europa, and turning Jupiter into a sun was not only going to help us, but also going to help them, and then they can start their own civilization.
Great, and then we get another Cold War.
Not quite. There's still early civilizations in the final book of the series, 3001.
Yay.
In that one, you had Dave Bowman, right, and Frank Poole on the Discovery, right?
Hmm.
Well, they find Frank Poole and they revive him after 1,000 years.
Goody.
And he's like, well, this is weird. I'm in the future now. And they have some culture shock. They go do some research on the monolith. They make contact with Dave Man. And Hal's also been absorbed in the monolith through all this, through various reasons. And they figure out that, okay, the monoliths are devices sent by some unknown galaxy, maybe even universe-spanning intelligence or civilization or something that is intent on not just quote uplifting beings to greater more complexity, building societies, etc., but also occasionally judging them, because apparently at some point they had been getting some signals that maybe this one planet, this one star over there had some a civilization about it, and then suddenly their star went nova, even though it shouldn't have. Isn't that weird?
So the weird vengeful god aliens.
A little bit. Well, they put it together as like, oh, so there might be some sort of central control system that's making decisions of this sort, and it might be judging us throughout this last, the rest of, since 4 million years ago, and well, it might be time for that the judgment finally comes about, and they decide, okay, so maybe we're gonna be okay. Maybe given the time of flight, the central controller system is about to come back with their thoughts on how 20th century Earth was. And, that whole, World War II era, all the Cold War stuff, all that sort of nastiness. And that might not look good on our report card. And so they decide, we're going to take down the monoliths.
And then they all die.
Well, they actually are successful. But, they got a space baby on their side, and it helps. But I maybe gave the whole spoilers there, but it's actually kind of a fun read. Yeah, so now you know the rest of the story, kind of a little bit more behind the scenes stuff. So that's the answers to all the questions.
The thing is that in the movie as it's presented, they're not really giving us anything. There's some very, very light themes of evolution and what humanity is going to become, and kind of this weird contrast between us inventing new life forms in the forms of artificial intelligence and becoming more and more robotic ourselves, which is just weirdly done, because it's only those two dudes. Everybody they show on the news and in the family calls and things is fine. Yeah, like they're normal people.
Yeah. But these guys, they're totally on mission. We are being spacemen. We are being, we are going to follow the books. We are going to have recreation time. But even that is pretty kind of stilted.
It's just the doctors. Unsettling. But then if they're doing like a judgy, oh my god, the war might not look so good to us thing. The only other thing you can almost connect from the movie, though it's like probably a coincidence because they set up the scenes so badly, is that maybe the monolith thing may have taught us to be violent.
Perhaps. Inciting us to, use tools to knock each other up.
And if that's the case, then it's their fault that there was wars.
So, these hypocritic monoliths make us kill people.
And that's just stupid message, and I hate it, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
The whole, all of human evolution is driven by male testosterone and violence, which is an actual quote from the frickin' documentary I watched. They had some person in there who I swear was an objectivist.
Yeah, I very much disagree with that sort of messaging there. So I said, a lot of this film is sort of, I guess, foundational for where I started as far as my thoughts about science fiction. But I will say that I've definitely evolved since a lot of this stuff, because that kind of notion's like, I don't really jive with that at all. So
I did think it was fun. One of the things I read that they wanted to do scientifically accurate early humans, but they couldn't figure out a way to film them and not get an X rating for the nudity.
Yep. It's like, just add more fur. It's going to be fine. Go full monkey suit.
Also, it bugs me that the stupid humanity invented weapons thing. Like, as far as we can tell from any anthropological evidence that we have, tools are never originally made as weaponry. They are, like, in the other, like, 3 examples of tool-using animals we have that developed it spontaneously and not in a lab, they have all used it to get bugs out of holes.
I need to poke something into this other thing in order to get the treat.
So that is, like, almost certainly the first tool, because that is how it has happened in, like, every species we have observed using tools.
Mm-hmm.
No frickin' crow or chimp picks up a bone and goes, oh, I can bash another chimp over the head with this. Because if you're at that point and you can't already rip each other in half, you run away from things. Those are your 2 options before you have tools, is you run away from stuff or you're strong enough to rip it in half.
And, the first group at the watering hole there definitely seemed of the running away sort, though they were very much capable, given that they are pretty much the same species as the folks that were invading, to also be, angry, shout, and punch each other if need be.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense. Why they did nothing to really demonstrate why the one tribe of monkey people was so much timider than the other tribe of monkey people until they invented the gun.
Now I'm a monkey with a gun. Oh God!
And just the whole that stupid jump cut that I mentioned earlier. They don't say it in the film, but I guess according to the novels and the script, that thing that the bone cuts into is supposed to be an orbital weapons platform, which is supposed to just tie into this, like, oh, all of human technology is weapons.
Which is not true.
Yeah.
But it is the obvious thing for folks of certain personalities and persuasions, because that's what they think about, but it's far from the totality of human civilization. We are not designed inherently to be murder machines.
And then the entire ending is freaking like, our new creation has decided that if it's going to survive, it has to kill the things that are trying to kill it, and then the people are going, well, if I'm going to survive, I have to kill this thing that's trying to kill me. So, violence is the only way to solve anything.
Though in 3001, the solution ends up being computer virus. Spoilers again, sorry.
So they basically just took the Independence Day route.
A little bit, but was this written before or after Independence Day? I forget. It was the mid-90s, though, so maybe. But yeah, they actually have a scene in 3001 where they like, yeah, we kind of want some way to be able to tackle this thing, because the monolith is still a technology 1,000 years in our future, so beyond us that we cannot possibly begin to understand it. But we think it might be some sort of computer. At least that's what the disembodied voices of Hal and Dave are telling us.
Okay. Well, I just looked it up, and 3001 came out a year after Independence Day.
Oh, so maybe it was inspired by,
Also, God is a Computer is the plot of an Asimov short story.
Some of these similar themes also pop up in the Romna series, which would be fun to talk about, but they don't have a movie yet. So I generally enjoyed that series. The first book was written by Clark, but he only was like editor for the others. So it definitely changes as far as focus and scope. But anywho, back to 2001.
See, I think my main just critique of the thing, aside from it just being slow, like there's definite cinematic issues. But even in the documentary I watched that interviewed several actors and Clark and like just a bunch of people who were involved in this, like every single one of them could only talk about how accurate they got the technology from the perspective of the time period. And to me, that is just the single most mind-numbingly boring use of science fiction as a concept.
Yep.
Saying like, so, the Bell Corporation invented a video phone 3 years ago. What if we take video phones and go, what if everyone used video phones? Oh my god, look at me doing futurist things.
Yeah, man. And it's not super interesting.
Yeah, it is the
segment.
Single most boring thing you can use science fiction for. And for some reason, it's the only thing that 90% of people want to talk about. And I will guarantee you, they would have invented cell phones whether or not they had the flip communicator in Star Trek.
Maybe it would have had a different design originally, but it would be still the same thing.
Well, they didn't look anything like flip communicator. Like, the original cell phones were massive bricks that ddidn't appear in any sci-fi movie.
Well, maybe in the massive bricks would actually have been flip phones. Yeah. As far as in my own science fiction writing, some of it is more on the hard sci-fi, and that stuff, yes, this stuff is plausible given that we know is doable, but I try to even use that sort of stuff as interesting restrictions, not necessarily, oh, this is a wonderful vision of the future, and I am just being uncreative with it. I want something that is, in those particular instances, something that is, quote, believable, but is also set up there for a purpose. So it's less, I'm going to have my video phone. I'm going to have my video phone because that's going to be, for some reason integral to the plot. Someone going to, not hear the conversation, but is going to be able to see it from across the room and pull a Hal and read lip read or something like that.
Yeah, even though the stupid, I don't know, that you just are going to have science magic. It's unavoidable if you're writing future stuff. And trying to frame your entire thing around we're going to avoid science magic, it not only limits you creatively to such an extent that you can't do anything interesting, but also winds up with boring stuff where it's like, look at how our spaceship lands in such a realistic way. The scene of them landing on the frickin' moon takes 20 minutes.
Yep.
And then they land on the moon, and you're like, oh my god, it's finally over. And then they cut to the spaceship being lowered down into a hangar for another 5 minutes.
Yep. And so it's like, well, this is kind of pretty to look at, but I'm done looking at it.
Also, I understand it was a film thing that was necessary so that they didn't have to have everyone on wires all the time, but no one would ever use grip shoes in a spacecraft. Why would you walk very slowly with grippy shoes when you can move way faster by flying around?
And you'd still feel weightless either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The grippy shoes would probably just make you more sick.
It's like, well, now I'm kind of weightless and stuck to things at the same time. Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The Expanse sort of has magnetic boots and things like that. But also other parts where it's like, yeah, we're not going to use those. We're actually going to go full 0G here. And it is, and there's also the sort of the middle times where it's like, where we have sort of effective gravity because we're accelerating.
Yeah, well, the one time that they should have used sticky shoes, they didn't when they were being outside of the spacecraft.
So which I guess gets to something else I want to sort of, draw us a little bit of attention to here, is that space is very, very, very big. So big that, it's like you go down to the corner shop and you're like, that took a while. That took me a few minutes. But that times a trillion.
I was going to start quoting hitchhikers.
But there is one moment where it was an outside view of the Discovery and there was a small rock floating by. You know how unlikely that is?
That was probably just them going through the asteroid belt, I guess, which makes it the most realistic asteroid belt I've ever seen in a movie.
True. Because, the asteroid belts you'd see in, say, Star Wars are so dense that they'd probably would be collapsing.
Yeah, they're basically protoplanets.
Yes. It's either something is coming together or something recently exploded. Either way, it's not going to be there for very long. It's, even though these are, mountain-sized rocks and not full planets, they still have gravity and they do attract each other. And so they will coalesce given enough time. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Sorry, I went Casablanca there. Anyway. So that's not science fiction. Let's get back into view there.
So just over, I don't know where else to go with this because I like leveled my cinematic qualms with it. And I talked about the only like small ounce of meaning you can possibly try to take from the thing because they intentionally gave it no meaning so that people would go like, "Oh my god, I don't understand it. Brilliant."
Well, we could also talk about we've touched a little bit on the influences it's done and sort of homages and references and things like that, but maybe we could talk about how it's sort of spawned science fiction as of this sort as a genre. No longer just zap guns and guys in monster suits running around, but there's something weird going on. And stuff is happening.
I mean, it is one of the earlier ones to do that, but like original Star Trek came out first.
Yes.
It's not like this is the first time that they ever did, non-pulp sci-fi shows. This is probably the first one that turned it into spaceship porn.
A little bit, yeah. There's, definite emphasis on the models here, and the model work is fantastic, by the way.
It is, though in my head I kept comparing it to Star Wars models, which isn't fair because that was 10 years later.
Yeah. I also was thinking a little bit about Spaceballs for various reasons. Not just because of the hats.
Well, I did kind of like that they put all the women in turbans so that they wouldn't have to deal with zero-G hair.
True. Very convenient. No, I guess it is also a little telling that there is, kind of only one lady character who has any lines here, and that's the Russian.
3 women who show up who are not stewardesses.
Yes.
They are all Russian scientists.
Yes.
Which I guess is just, oh my god, those crazy communists are letting women do science.
Oh no. Whatever shall we do? Question mark. But I guess in some ways it is a little telling in the attitudes of how science was sort of running at the time, and unfortunately kind of still is. That the Soviet Union was actually much better at having gender equality in the sciences, because there's less, this is a man's thing where you have the strong jaw and you ladies have to be, toiling in the kitchen stuff, like sort of the stereotypical view in the Americas. But as sort of like, we're all part of the state here. We're going to be doing the thing, and you guys know what's your math here, and some of you are ladies, so you're now getting ushered into the university over here and to have at it and become engineers.
Well, as everyone's learning now with those couple of movies they're making, all of the math in the U.S. was still done by women. They just didn't get any credit for it.
But doing calculations, that's not action. It's not adventure. It's not being on the rocket, man. It's sitting behind a desk and toiling for hours on end. So obviously the strong guys can't be doing that, right?
Yeah, that's what made this movie so boring. It's we've got square jaw boring man 1 and 2, and possibly 3 if you count the doctor dude from the beginning. But he was indistinguishable for the other. It took me 20 minutes to figure out we'd switched characters.
Yeah. Dr. Floyd is an older guy, pulls the Mitchell, of course, from Star Trek, and Dave is the guy with the really kind of intense eyes.
And not I know that these are better actors. They were intentionally told to underact.
Yes. Tone it down, guys.
Yeah, which they're just the most boring competent man. They're not even an interesting, stupid, competent man like Kirk, where everything just works out. They are the 2 most boring people alive.
I guess it's an attempt sort of to do the blank slate thing, but that doesn't really work for people these days. At least this sort of type of blank slate guy.
I'm not sure. I don't think they were supposed to be blank slates. I think it was supposed to be a stylistic counterpoint to the computer having emotions. They're like, oh, does the computer have emotions? I don't know. I don't have emotions, so I cannot recognize them in other people.
So I guess maybe here's, maybe my last probing question. Do you think Hal has emotions?
Well, I don't know. We've discussed the AI thing before, and basically at the end of the day, it doesn't particularly matter.
True.
Like, there's no way to prove that either you or I have emotions. We don't have a test for emotions. We don't have a definition of what emotions even are. First, we need to define what an emotion is, and then we can decide whether something has it.
Exactly, yeah. But I will say that Hal at least seems worried about his own existence. Yeah, he's willing to kill for it.
And he says that he's afraid to die, which is, the computer cares more about living than either of the people in this movie do.
Like, well, we got a job to do, I guess. We should probably be alive for it, I guess. Let's be alive. Okay. Sorry, Hal.
Like, I know they took it as kind of a stylistic parody, but this just reminds me of Captain Simeon and the Space Monkeys, where some aliens were going to hyper-evolve the first Earth organism that got there, and instead of it being a human, it was a chimp, and they hyper-evolved the chimp. This seems like the people on board the spacecraft killed the actual intelligent and empathetic character that was supposed to get evolved, and they got involved by accident.
Yep. It's like, oh no, we've uplifted the wrong one.
Also, this is, like, maybe it's a commentary on how we shouldn't let, like, basically psychopaths be the people on the front lines of things in case an intelligent alien decides to hyper-involve the first person they see.
So it might be a bad ambassador for our future.
Because they showed, like I said, they showed people on Earth being normal. All the Russians seemed normal.
Mm-hmm.
Square jaw boring man gets to be the space god.
He seems less of an asshole later, by the way. But anyway.
You made me wish, I wish this was Cheech and Chong. At least it would have been interesting.
Cheech and Chong versus the monolith.
I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave. Dave's not here, man.
I've sort of run out of the things I wanted to sort of poke at here. You got anything else?
Well, I think I don't know. there's no other things you can derive from this movie. It was anthropologically wrong. And that bugs me for a movie that's talking about how right it got all its science.
So I guess for me then, in some ways, it was in itself a monolith event that started me on my path of wonder through the world of science fiction, an encounter. Then I realized, oh, but I can be more than what it's trying to call me to be. Dun dun dun.
The original production design for the monolith was supposed to be a screen that played informational videos.
So, like the sphere computer from the more recent Time Machine movie. Sweet.
It was supposed to show up to the pre-humans and play them videos on how to make tools and fire.
I recall there being something like a glass pyramid that did something a little bit different, but I didn't realize it was that specific.
Yeah, it would. I mean, I wish they could have seen. What if they did it? At the time? Let's see, late 60s. So they would have had those awful like government issue propaganda-y informational films.
Oh, that'd been glorious.
With bad voiceover.
But it's all in screaming monkey sounds.
Yeah. Little Timmy has found himself lost in the woods, but thankfully Timmy remembered his Boy Scout manual on how to make fire.
The image animation of two sticks rubbing against each other, interlaced with what the hominids doing it. Mm-hmm. Now do be careful. Fire is hot. Oh, but it's so silly. So, wanna do the game show bit?
Yes, we've milked this for all it's worth, so I think it's time for the galaxy's favorite game show! Woo!
Hey everybody, welcome to the game show portion of the show, where we got ourselves a number of prizes to hand out. The first one is the Awkward Cover Story Award, which goes to Dr. Floyd and company for the cover story of a deadly virus running rampant with, which will no doubt distress everybody back on Earth, that they're fearing that their families are probably dead. What does he win, Gepwin?
Floyd wins the inciting of the outbreak of the hot war, because you certainly couldn't blame the Russians for inciting some amount of hostility if they think the Americans are going to bring down the space plague from the moon.
Yeah, let's not be doing that, Dr. Floyd. How about you get onto that, revealing to the public sooner rather than later? Our second award, which is the Space Baby Award, which goes to Dave, of course, for becoming exactly this. What does he win, Gepwin?
Dave the Space Baby wins a placenta, because he can't eat in that thing.
Yeah, there's only so much good vibes and monoliths can give you as far as your nutrition needs are. Our third award, which is Garbage In, Murder Out, which is the prize going to Hal for his perfect interpretation of the notion that the mission is the most important thing of all time, and, the crew probably shouldn't have gotten in the way of that. So, Gepwin, what does he win?
Hal wins some human-sized mouse traps. If he'd gotten rid of that danged human infestation earlier, none of this would have happened.
I think you might, that's a great idea. Just put one of those right in the airlock. Would have taken care of Dave, no problem. Our fourth award is the Menacing Geometry Award, which goes to the Monolith for just being so dang spooky. What does it win, Gepwin?
The Monolith wins a bottle of Windex and a buffer to keep it just all that smooth and shiny.
Yeah, it needs to be sparkling, clean, shiny, and reflective for all time. Otherwise, you'll be able to make definition in it.
But the original version of the Monolith should win the Teletubby Award. Again.
Original version of the Monolith, not present. But yeah, we'll go and give it to the Teletubby Award to the original Monolith. Our final prize is the Z-Rust Award, which goes to Kubrick and Clark in unison, representing us a future that seems very plausible at the time, but, we didn't quite get the space plane thing going on. What do they win, Gepwin?
They win some interesting retro futurist furniture. The style was neat. Mid-century spaceships are kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is also why my point about this being boring science fiction comes in. Because if you try to guess the future, you either got it right or you didn't. So in 20 years, we either go, good job, or that was dumb.
And I think they, a little bit more of that was dumb sort at this point. Though I would like a moon base at some point. Though maybe a little bit more high speed. Anyway, Gepwin, take us away.
Oh, thank you for all of our contestants and all of you for joining us here on the Galaxy's favorite game show. Woo!
So, you want to live on the moon?
No.
Okay.
The moon is a harsh mistress.
And it's kind of dull there and slightly radioactive, too.
Yeah. I don't know what you do except jump around.
Oh, that reminds me. One thing I forgot to mention earlier. Space is not only big, but when you're outside the Earth's magnetic field, you're going to be exposed to the full brunt of the solar wind. So maybe that's part of why the design of the Discovery was so long.
Fun, deadly radiation.
Maybe it was generating some sort of magnetic field or something like that with the length of it. Those big electromagnets or something. I don't know.
All right, so for as accurate and scientific-y as they were trying to be with this stupid thing, where was the spinny bit?
Inside the bulb up front.
Yeah, because it didn't seem like it matched up scale-wise, given how big the hangar bay thing was that took up half of the big dome.
Nope. I think maybe it's supposed to be wedged between the hangar bay and the flight control cockpit at the top. Maybe, but I'm not sure.
All right.
So yeah, the spinny bit is a little bit larger than it probably should be as far as the scale of the model goes. So yeah, I'll have to go with it. Yeah, I'll have to agree with you there.
Also, we didn't mention it, but I get it. You used the moving set thing, Like, you built a rotating set that they've been building for special effects in movies for 50 years. Good job. You don't need to use it in every shot.
Yep.
Use it once. We go, ooh, they built a rotating set. How'd they get that guy to dance on the ceiling?
Crazy, man. He must be magical.
It's not like it was a comedy routine they did 20 years before this.
Yeah, I left out my synopsis, like the lady walking up the wall sort of bit, which takes 5 minutes. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of cool to look at. Wish it was on its own this once in the entire movie as opposed to like 5 times.
And always
Anyway.
spinning towards the future.
Forward, not backward, upward, not forward, and always twirling towards freedom.
Also, the episode that we get the classic, what is this, some kind of tube?
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing how many of those quotes from that particular episode I quote randomly.
All right, next week, we're back to Star Trek, and we're not coming in on what sounds like a particularly good episode.
Nope, it's something involving a virus or amoeba or something.
Space amoeba. A spamoeba.
So more energy things in space.
Coming on to the immunity syndrome.
Wait, isn't being immune to something good?
Yeah, and a syndrome is just a cluster of otherwise unrelated symptoms.
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense. But does it make more sense than 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I don't know. Space amoebas probably don't. I mean, maybe the space amoeba was what sent the monoliths.
Now we know the rest of the story.
The disappearance of a Vulcan ship leads the wary Enterprise crew to battle with a huge space organism.
So back to the ray guns and action adventures.
Let's see, we got that. We've got after that we've got like 10 episodes before a episode named that I recognize, and I only recognize it because it's possibly the worst episode of all time.
Uh-oh. Is it Spock's brain?
Yes, it is Spock's brain.
Well then.
But we got a while till that. I think we get a time travel episode after. Oh no, after that is something called Private Little War.
Oh, that one sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's another racist one,
Uh-oh.
I think.
Dang it, classic Star Trek. Why you do this?
Then there's some sort of alien possessing thing. Then there's Nazi Planet.
Yeah.
So Nazi Planet's coming.
With Kirk in his full regalia there.
That's fun.
Spock too.
Anyway, Next week, we battle space amoebas on Watches of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, space amoeba vampires strike again. Oh no! You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.